And hello there. Thanks for staying with us on the Joy News channel. This is The Probe with me, Blessed Sogah. And thanks for spending some time with us tonight, because we all know that in the next 24 hours, we will see the end of July. But the 31st of July is also marking a significant period on the calendar of government. It's marking the event where the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, is expected to present the mid-year budget review. At least a statement we're getting from the Finance Ministry is giving us a sense that the Finance Minister will provide some insight as to how government's economic and fiscal policy has fared all through the first half of this year. So the big question is, how has the Ghanaian economy fared in the first half of 2023? That's a big question we are asking even before the Finance Minister appears in Parliament tomorrow to address the nation. I have key stakeholders joining us tonight to do that discussion. I'll tell you about them, but don't forget that we are live on the Joy News channel on Joy 99.7 FM and also at myjoyonline.com. Feel free to join us with your comments and also your feedback on Facebook as we stream at Joy News and all of our social media handles. I'm Blessed Sogah. Stay with us. When we return, we'll delve deeper into the matters. Stay with us. And thanks for staying with us here on the Joy News channel. This is The Probe, and as I was indicating earlier, we're looking at the economic and fiscal policy of government through the first half of the year. At least we'll officially be hearing from the Finance Minister tomorrow, but stakeholders have a sense of what might be happening to the Ghanaian economy even before we get the official details, because they play in the sector. And that's why I want to bring in Professor Godfred Obeng, who's a Professor of Finance at the University of Ghana, joining the conversation tonight. Thank you, Prof, for spending some time with us. Dr. Joseph Obeng is the president of the Ghana Union of Traders Association. Thank you so much, Doc, for spending some time also in studio. In fact, spending some time with us on a Sunday evening means much to us. Thanks for joining us. And then later on, we'll be joined by some other guests who will be spending time with us, the likes of John Jinapo, who's ranking on the Mines and Energy Committee of Parliament. And we'll also hear from the Association of Ghana Industries, AGI, key sector that we also need to look at. But let's get into the details, at least knowing that the Finance Ministry has released that statement indicating, quote, that this will provide insight into government's economic and fiscal policy for the year 2023. But how has the year fared so far? Professor Obeng, let me start off with you, because you've been looking at the figures. So many controversies, even before we got the IMF bailout, and we have some level of respite, as many would say. But this will be the first time, at least, we'll hear from the Finance Minister after seeking that bailout. So, first of all, reflecting on the first half of the year, what's been your assessment and what do you look forward to as the Finance Minister appears in Parliament tomorrow?
Thank you very much. Good evening to my co-panelists and those who are yet to join. Good evening to your cherished viewers. I think it's mid-year review, but it looks as though it's a substantive budget. It's because of the expectations. It's because of what the economy is going through. It's because there's reasonable demand that government has to respond, and therefore the mid-year budget review, it looks as though it's a substantive budget presentation, and therefore stakeholders want some revisions, want some changes. Also because of the level of suffering, this level of suffering doesn't discriminate. The country is going through acute economic crisis that doesn't spare anyone, regardless of your political affiliation. It doesn't spare households or individuals. It doesn't spare businesses. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even spare Bank of Ghana itself. Let me put it that way.
Right.
And you understand why I'm saying so, because if you look at the annual reports of the central bank, right, you see the impact of the domestic debt exchange on the balance sheet of Bank of Ghana. That tells you that this is a crisis of a proportion probably we haven't seen in our life, right? Okay, and the impact is pervasive. Okay, so if you see the IMF supported program and you look at the level of austerity, fiscal adjustment, utility adjustment, reforms that we have to go through, and you put that within a certain global perspective, there is practically no country on the face of the earth right now that is taking their citizens through something like this.
Wow.
It doesn't matter that COVID is a pandemic. It doesn't matter that Russia, Ukraine, the impact is pervasive. Okay, so if you check across...
Sorry to cutting on that point, but for someone who'd say, well, you're just hyping matters, you're putting them at the extreme, what figures or perhaps paint that sense of a picture to us as to what exactly is happening to the average Ghanaian?
So if you pick the balance sheet of the average Ghanaian, they practically don't have any cushion. A conservative simulation that the World Bank did, they are looking at numbers in excess of 800,000 people, Ghanaians, who have been pushed into poverty. If you look at the data also from Ghana Statistical Service, it tells you the number of people who are unemployed, who are also food insecure, and they're multidimensionally poor. If you pick that data and then you look at it even across the middle class in terms of what the domestic debt exchange has done, so I'm just giving you a certain picture, and it's also the reality.
Right.
And the reason why the mid-year budget review, there is that level of expectation. Now, you will soon see, I'm sure in the course of the week, there will be a bit more discussion on what the DDE and the acute economic crisis has done to the central bank, actually the bank of last resort,
right,
that has its total liabilities exceeding total assets. That essentially tells you that the bank of last resort is actually in need of a bailout, maybe from a government that is already in a bailout arrangement with the IMF, right? So all of this, the earlier we all come to terms with the reality and rally everyone behind so that whatever recovery we are painting, that we are looking to have, and I believe that Ghana will bounce back. I'm highly confident that Ghana will bounce back. The recovery may be slow and painful, but it's also very important that we understand that this is the reality. We have to go through some painful process in order to come out of this. And that is the only way out. Because we don't have any other country other than maybe what we have right now. So that is where I'm coming from. So certainly, and as you rightly said, it's the first major presentation after the IMF program was approved.
Yeah.
To that extent, the expectation that we want to see to what extent government policies, fiscal, monetary, from the central bank align well with the tenants of the IMF-supported program. Of course, when the budget was presented November last year, we knew that it had the blessings of the IMF, because by then, government had gone far with the IMF in terms of the program, negotiation, and all of that. So probably the 2023 budget will reflect the broad fiscal framework with the IMF. Of course, the details and the rest of them will come later. But it's also important because if you look at the IMF program, the program targets, the first major review that will happen in November this year has June end date. So we've gone past June, and therefore some level of update in terms of whether we are on track with the IMF supported program will be very needful, and the market is highly expectant.
I see. And since you're talking about the markets, there are so many players in that sector. Doc, just hold on for us, because there's a lot more to unpack in terms of the diagnosis, what else the finance minister could be considering at this point. But Dr. Joseph Obeng is still with us in studio, so let's get their expectations as well, because, Doc, I clearly recall you issued a statement when we were heading for this IMF program. In fact, your group was skeptical about this whole arrangement. Has anything changed for the group so far?
Yeah, it's very important to know that the private sector is supposed to be the engine of growth. But we are not growing as expected. If that is so, then the economy will also not grow. I think we have to understand that.
Right.
We have to recognize the fact that vibrant private sector drives every economy in the world. Right. And so it is very important to create the enabling environment for we to achieve this growth that we so seek. And that is the problem of Ghanaian businesses and even the larger economy. And so it is what we are expecting is that the private sector needs a space to grow. Essentially.
But when you say that, government will come out to you and say, we've provided, the enabling environment. So what else are you asking for?
What is it?
Right.
If you know the government own principle that we should move from taxation to production.
Yes.
And then now we are being overtaxed. Cost of doing business is too many. And we cannot even contain them. And so if government itself knows this, and it is for this reason that 2017, they removed what they call the nuisance taxes.
Right.
And now the nuisance taxes are coming in different forms and shapes, including the COVID levy. It should be out of the table. We don't need it. COVID levy came to solve a problem, and we were talked to and we accepted because we all wanted to manage the COVID pandemic. And so once it is not there, it is only right that we take it out of the table. We also have a special import levy that came as a result that the previous government needed some push, and that we also accepted that after the sunset, they brought some sunset clauses. Right. And so if this thing goes on, it means that we are not going to have confidence in leadership when they come and appeal for some of these things.
Do I get the clear impression that from the start of the year to where we are now, things don't seem to be going on well with the business community?
No, especially in the last quarter of 2022. Last few months I've seen businesses going, suffering too much. We are actually suffocating. If you look at the last quarter of 2022, that's where the exchange rate, the depreciation of the cedi reached its peak of about 15.5. We started the year with about 6.4. And so most of our capitals got depleted, about 50%, over 50%. And so most businesses' inability even to import the volumes that we used to import. That's why even the port is dry. Right. Because first, if you're able to bring your capital is for $100,000 and it has been depleted by 50%, now you are only able to change by virtue of the depreciation only 50,000. So can you bring the same quantity of goods? No.
And I think as we speak now, it's just about 11.
Yes, that's what I was coming to talk about. But whatever gain that the seeming
cedi,
the cedi is gaining is being overtaken by the taxes and then other costs of doing business, and that's why we are not getting the effect. Even our inflation. The inflation that we experienced, about 53%, was tied up to the exchange rate, the depreciation of last year. Right. And so if the exchange rate is being stabilized, then it is expected that inflation will follow suit. Why is inflation not coming down? Inflation is not coming down because even Bank of Ghana keep on increasing the monetary policy rate, which is not the solution. Because it also go and compound the cost of doing business, which have been the problem of this inflation that we are suffering, because it's an accumulation of cost. Right. So all that we are saying is that we should be able, the expectation of businesses is that we seek the reduction of taxes and then pruning down cost of doing business so that we become competitive.
I hope that my question is not belated, but we heard from, and that's been confirmed by our parliamentary correspondent, that over the week. No, that was on Friday. The finance minister at least engaged the minority side of the house. You are key players in the industry. Were you given the opportunity, at least just to get some feedback through to government before the presentation?
The finance minister.
And what were some of the issues?
The finance minister also engaged with this.
Okay.
On I think last Thursday or Friday.
Wednesday. Okay. Right.
And then we sent all our petitions. Don't forget that the John Consultative Forum, for which I'm the coordinator. Right. We have made press conference like we were talking about, and then we didn't have the opportunity to have stakeholder engagement, and we've been talking. It was a source of worry to us. And then the minister have promised that they are going to re-engage us, and that we are this media budget is just a supplementary budget there, and so they are going to engage us, and most of our issues is going to be taken care of at the mainstream budget in November. So
it doesn't look like everything will be tackled.
Yeah, but I think all that they are thinking about is how to sustain the economy, the currency, and all that. And so, if they're able to stabilize the system, then of course they also look at.
Okay, but given this, fiscal space, the very tight one that the government is dealing with, what at least, what's the least that you're on the lookout for to say, oh, even if we don't get everything, this will do for us?
We need an entrenched stability. That one is good for every business.
All right.
So you told me the dollar is about 11 cedis. If you're able to get it for a longer time, that's how business operates.
When it's stable.
If it is stable, then of course. And if other costs is not piling up on us, that's why we are always talking about the cost of doing business. The inflation that we are experiencing is not good for businesses. Right. Business does not thrive on inflation. And because it also pushes the interest rate that we are paying. The interest rate is about 35% for businesses. And then the exchange rate, if it is not stable. So if the exchange rate is stable, then we are expecting that inflation should also follow suit. And then we can start having the space if the taxes are also pruned down.
Right. We'll look at the taxes in detail. But Professor Bokpin, what options are available to the finance minister now as you speak? We've heard from the business community utmost concern about taxes, but in lieu of that, if they don't get it, at least they want stability in the economy. What's your projection, first of all, looking at how the cedi is gaining marginally? Does it look like, from the research you're doing, things will be a bit stable going forward?
I think that we have seen the IMF effect, right? And also since the program approval, and then, of course, the first 2 weeks around the program approval, we saw how the cedi recovered part of its lost value strongly, but of course we knew that we could not sustain that trajectory, and therefore the honeymoon around the program decelerated the day. But of course, the last 2 months or so, we've seen that level of stability. Of course, it's still very high. If you look at where the cedi moved from beginning of 2022 to 11.5, we could see that jump is very high, right? And therefore, that tells you the impact. I also agree with Dr. Obeng that the whole thing is sustainability, predictability. Every business, it's not only businesses, everyone prefers relative stability, right? So it's also good for planning, and therefore we need to build on that.
But do you really feel that the finance minister has an opportunity to make any significant or drastic change? Are we, overly ambitious on that?
Policy management is all about that. It's about managing the delicate balance between fiscal consolidation and then also growth. In the immediate, depending on the mix and then also the pace, the fiscal consolidation could impose immediate costs. And now, And because of the level of crisis, we chose a pace that is to fast track the adjustment. We call that one front loading, right? And then also the mix, we chose both revenue and then expenditure, but it's heavily revenue. If you have a fiscal consolidation strategy that is predominantly revenue based, what that tells you is that it has implications for households and private sector. And that is where Dr. Obeng is coming from. So the fiscal consolidation, that's why we said it's about managing the delicate balance between expenditure cuts that free up space so you don't burden households and private sector disproportionately. That is what every country is going through.
Right.
To the extent that the strength of your economy is linked to the strength of your private sector. So if your private sector is complaining, business confidence from the private sector is low, they are not going to expand, they are not committing to expansion, capital investment, it tells you that in the medium to the long term, you are undermining the sustainability of whatever recovery you seek to make today. And that has been Ghana's problem. It's not only this government. Look, if you look at the data since 1992, Ghana hasn't moved essentially beyond macroeconomic stability. Ours has been one of relative macroeconomic stability and then instability in between. Meanwhile, macroeconomic stability is not an end in itself. It's only a means to an end. It only becomes sustainable if we can build on that towards greater economic transformations and inclusive productivity growth. That would have to come from private sector, and we don't have that now. That is a problem. Now, because government wants to restore macroeconomic stability, this is coming at a cost, and we are not managing it well. So at the end of the day, if you put the balance sheet on the table, we are saying that which part of expenditure can we cut, which will enable us to reach the same goal as imposing more taxes. Government has to make that hard choice.
So what you mean to say is that in all consideration, top focus or priority should be about cutting expenditure. What exactly would that deal with? What problem would that deal with?
So if you look at the IMF supported program, the fiscal adjustment is contributing about 5% of GDP towards our debt sustainability. That 5%, 3% of that is coming from revenue enhancement. Only 2% is coming from expenditure. What that tells you is that in our journey towards debt sustainability, the fiscal consolidation, revenue enhancement will contribute more than 50%. The important question you need to ask yourself is, where would the revenue come from? It's going to come from households. It's going to come from you and I. It's going to come from private sector. And that is why you see the layers of taxes, right? So, and you look at it, since COVID came, the number of taxes Ghana has introduced, COVID-19, and how many countries in Africa have done that? Okay, we want to immortalize COVID, right? Right. Then we have introduced e-levy. Okay, we have also increased the standard VAT rate from 12.5% to 15%. Actually, we only had that scope to increase the VAT rate simply because we decided to treat the straight levies as not VAT. When in all circumstances and application, it meets all the requirements of VAT.
Okay, but since you're bringing all of them up, COVID-19, e-levy, and then the revised VAT, can we consolidate at this point? Is that the optimum way to go? Because Dr. Obeng was just talking about how the business community is increasingly getting worried about these figures.
It's possible. It's possible. So one of the things that government doesn't have to wait till November to do will be to match the standard VAT rate with the straight levies and peg it at below 18%. Okay.
Will we achieve the same? Will we achieve the same effect of revenue?
It's going to have implication for revenue. The next important thing will be that revenue gap.
Yeah.
How do we close it? Can we close it through administrative and compliance? It's possible. Because if you look at our VAT efficiency, okay, where it is just around 45%, it tells you that there is scope to generate more VAT revenue through compliance and administrative reforms than through increasing the rate. Then again, when you pick the corporate tax rate, the inefficiency in that tax handle is more than 55%. What that tells you is that we could generate more corporate tax revenue without burdening the faithful few. And GRA is already doing something in that area, and that is the support they will need from government in terms of the e-VAT and the rest of them. If we are able to digitize our revenue compliance channels and remove the human interference interface, which also enables corruption and the rest of them, chances are that the state, at the end of the day, will be better off and would also preserve space for the private sector to grow and create employment.
I see.
That is the way you look at it.
Right, but Prof, if that's to happen in terms of compliance, the business community will not be left out. You're asking for, some relief in terms of taxation, but some of the members of your community do not comply. You agree?
No, the compliance is because there's no fairness.
Fairness or effectiveness? Which is which?
The fairness, effectiveness,
right.
and efficiency that we've been saying this. And we, in fact, when we engage GRA, this is all that we talk about. When we met with the finance minister, we also said that we do not need new taxes. The old taxes that we have, if we adopt pragmatic and effective ways of collection, the system itself, and if it is affordable and simplified, then it will ensure compliance.
Okay, but you heard from Prof. Prof's concern is definitely there'll be a little shortfall. So we need to enforce, we need an effective mechanism to check that. How do we go about it?
The VAT as it's structured is not helping compliance. And even in the market, people want to pay the VAT. It's a consumption tax.
Okay.
Not that. But there's no policy that is forcing the consumer to collect the VAT. I would think that if I ask you the last time you collected VAT from Makola, you will say most people, and it's consumption, but when you go to the market, the people rather the seller, because he has already registered for VAT and he has
challenges. They are okay.
Then they use their own money to go and pay at the end of the day, where it is a consumption tax. Where is the fairness? And then also one tax system has three ways of collection. That's the standard rate, the flat rate, and then those who have not registered and who do not register and charge the VAT.
But don't you see the bigger danger here? If we consolidate all of this, it may trigger even higher figures, right?
No. I mean, all that businesses seek is parity and fairness. If there's equity, every business will thrive. And then if we are using VAT as a effective way of enhancing on our revenue, then of course one thing that we have to recognize is that it's not a tax for the one who has registered,
but for consumption.
It's for the consumer. So how are we not putting some compulsion on the part of the consumer to collect this VAT? So we have to restructure the whole VAT system. If we are able to even structure it well, VAT alone can make Ghana very rich, because there's a whole lot of people who are not captured into the net. You recall that recently they brought a compliance system called upfront tax, and people have started registering. So these are the innovative ways to do that. I've been telling you, compliance of tax compliance is not magical. It's only affordable and simplicity. to make people adopt. You say that the Ghana's tax to GDP is higher than, less than, lower than the rest of the
West Africa.
West Africa.
I was just about going.
Because our taxes, the tax that we pay here is too much, and people do not comply.
But the average is so low. You agree? That's what I want to take your thoughts on.
Because there's no compliance, and then our neighboring countries, the number of taxes that we pay here, that's not what they are paying. VAT, ours is complex and higher than our neighbors. If you go to port, the cost items at the port numbers about 20. When the transport minister took us to do to evaluate other ports and all that, others were the highest. Others are going is about 10 tax components or cost components at the port. And so, how do you?
So you don't agree with that notion?
So it's compliance.
We're still
compliance is the key. So let's simplify the tax system. Let's also make it affordable. Let's spread the tax net. But the challenge
here is that we're not able to get more people into the tax net. So why not deal with the figure?
No,
just increase it a bit.
Why are you not getting the people?
And get more
because
revenue.
DRA says that effectively about 13 million people have the capacity to pay the taxes and they are not paying. So you have to adopt prudent ways of bringing them in. And also,
we tried at least with the e-levy. You saw what happened.
So let me give you a simple example. Yes. You know the construction in Ghana is very big. If you talk about construction and the amount of money is involved in construction, the people who are doing real estate, the foreign direct investors, government projects, and all that, those people who are key in that industry, most of them do not pay.
You feel the waivers are too much?
The electrician who comes to your house to fix or build your house, the plumber, the painter, the POP guy, and all that. These are huge sums. If the construction,
you in the private sector make too much profits. That's the argument.
No, what I'm saying is that we bring other. No.
And the fact that
what we have to do is that make sure that we have to build task maps.
Right.
I wonder whether we even have this task map to know that this area is paying, this area is not paying. Right. We have to cater all these people into the net. And that's why I've given you a clue as to how we can bring, and that construction industry even employs a huge chunk of people. How are we doing to?
But I was bringing you back to the e-levy because it was part of the justification from government that, well, everybody at least uses that service.
You know where we failed, because I said that let's reach out to many people, but we have to make it affordable. It has to be, tax shouldn't be something that looks like punitive. Tax shouldn't be like something like a punishment. So if you make it negligible and the person voluntarily pay, it enhances on your compliance. That's what I'm trying to say. So tax, in order to achieve your tax, is compliance and nothing else. So you can stand one place and pile up the taxes, and if the person does not comply, they comply. How do you get it? So that we have to ensure that we have compliance tools, and that we are even talking with DRE, and then by restructuring the VAT is very important.
Professor Bobkin, do you agree with this? The need to widen the tax net. At least government has made that argument that we're not even paying much. Not many people are paying, by the way.
Yeah, but it's also not true that Ghana is in this situation because our tax to GDP ratio is very low. It's not true.
Thank you.
I'm telling you, it's not true. Let government come and prove it.
Exactly.
It's not true. There are other countries with similar tax to GDP ratio and have better and quality development outcome than what Ghana has. That's the data. It is a lie for anybody to think that Ghana is in this situation because our tax to GDP ratio is low. That's not true. Look, if you do the modeling, you realize that the tax to GDP ratio Ghana has had in the last 15 years, the development outcome we should have, we are suboptimal in that point.
And that's based on?
It's simply because there's too much corruption.
Exactly.
If you look, let me tell you something. We are talking about realistic pricing, utility. Which model can you use to do realistic pricing in Ghana when you have the level of inefficiency in generation, transmission, and distribution? When politicians, through largely inefficiency, look at the independent power purchase agreement we have signed, and look at the discussions the country has gone through in the last 6-8 years. Tell me, with that level of inefficiency, what kind of pricing can solve that problem without burdening Ghanaians, private sector, and households? So what I'm saying is that in as much as there is room for us to generate a lot more revenue, it should not be taken that that is the only solution, and that we must equally pay particular attention about the lifestyle of the average Ghanaian politician, right? The governance cost, the corruption, the inefficiency in our public investment management process, procurement infractions, and the corruption in all of that across. Look, with this level of corruption, look, conservative estimates is that the country loses not less than $3 billion annually through corruption.
But the understanding too is that we're all feeling the effect. We're in this together, isn't it? Are some feeling better?
Look, so the bedroom economy is not the same. So we are not feeling the effect the same way.
I see.
I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. Okay? So the impact is not the same. Just as, look, we can say inflation is very high, but as we have all gathered together here, we carry different inflation rates because your inflation is a reflection of your consumption pattern. Okay? But also, you will see that, so when we talk about corruption, we talk about poverty, it doesn't mean everybody is poor. There's concentration of wealth in the hands of very few people to the detriment of the majority. Okay, so we need to create a fair society, a just society, because that is a society that is sustainable. So, Blessing, all the point that I'm saying is that we need to adopt a two-pronged approach of efficiency, important expenditure cuts, that must go along with revenue enhancement. Other than that, with this level of corruption, size of government, when we talk about size of government, it's not just ministers alone. You are looking at it across ministries, department, agencies, and state-owned enterprises. You check, since 1992, you will see that increasingly, size of government keeps increasing every year. Meanwhile, the productivity effect of that probably is zero. And once that keeps increasing, that is encumbering fiscal space, which is rather needed to be created in order to stimulate growth, create the enabling environment for private sector to grow. And now because government, and look, it's not just the last 20 years, since independence, the whole system has just been designed to make government comfortable at the expense of households and private sector. That's all.
Okay.
And that system doesn't make government responsible. We can say this because it cuts across regimes. And so it doesn't matter your political affiliation. This is Ghana. And it's not sustainable. We can have IMF program maybe on a weekly basis, but if we don't come together and solve the governance failures, it will not change the dynamic.
Ever since the announcement of this IMF program, do you even see that posture from policymakers, the fact that at least we're willing to cut back?
I don't see that much. Because if government was going to signal that, we should have seen that in the IMF program. Because government preach one thing, that they were cutting on allowance, they were cutting on this, but it's not in the program. It's not in the program. It's not costed. It's not in the program. If you see the planned expenditure cut under the program, you will see capex. Meanwhile, this country needs to spend a little bit more in the area of capital expenditure. We need roads. We need quality infrastructure, both economic and social infrastructure. We need that. That is what we are cutting. And we are hoping that the fiscal savings from there will be 0.9%. But we don't need that. I think we need to strike a good balance between governance costs and freeing up space for growth enhancing spending. Ghana needs to take that decision quite quickly because our problem is largely governance. And it's the governance failures that manifest explicitly in economic mismanagement, corruption, and all of that. So if the problem is largely governance, the solution must reflect same.
Doc, when you were engaging the finance minister last week, did you raise that concern about the need for even our leadership to also share in this in the bed?
Yeah, well, when we have this opportunity, there is a platform to also let them know our frustration. Why are we being overburdened with taxes? We are being overburdened with taxes because of over expenditure. It's as simple as that. Because if the expenditure is high, you have to go and find the resources to make up. And so it's very important that we have to look at our expenditure pattern. It's not helping us. Government should set its priorities right. And then we have to set apart our party manifestos as against the priorities of a state. What purpose does it serve for us to continue to pay nurses allowances and all that? It doesn't serve any cause. Not even that advanced nations are continuing to do that.
You feel you're sweating and someone is enjoying it?
Yeah, but no, if we have, and we have to do it. But if you don't have, you don't have to do certain things that will create problem for the generality of the economy. And that's what I'm talking about. Even aside that, a lack of value for money. I'm expecting that as the finance minister is going to read the budget, there should be a page that will also talk about how they are going to ensure value for money. Professor Obeng was talking about procurement and the lapses there and all that. So if you bring all this money and then one contract, one person gets about 20 million, and it's so common that they get $100 million and get $30 million, means that we did not do the necessary due diligences to ensure value for money. If we continue to do that, what are we doing to ourselves? Then we continue to, because we want to be self-sufficient. And all the policies that we have outlined in terms of taxations that we have learned is killing the initiative of the government itself, the 1D, 1F. Because what purpose does it serve if your produce of 1D, 1F cannot be sold to the even the Ghanaian market? You cannot even be sold outside to... You know, last week we visited one of the manufacturing companies. Now we are endorsing the manufacturing companies and their products. And we went to one of the companies, Avinash. They produce oil, but now they cannot compete with the oil that is being produced in Togo.
What's accounting for that?
Because of cost of doing business. That of Ghana is very high, and that of Togo is very low. Ask yourself, why is it that most of your sisters, I know in your house you have some of your sisters going to Togo to buy goods all the time. The goods that they are going to buy, most of them are not even manufactured in Togo. It's imported, the same as we also import. But when they import and bring it, they are able to sell down, as you're cheaper than what we do. And now it has trickled down to their manufacturing companies. That's what this oil company was talking. They said that they used to employ 1,000 workers. Now it has reduced to 200 because of this competition from our neighbor. Because they buy all this oil from that corridor, and then so these are some of the things that we have. So if you say that pull down a taxation and then expand the tax net, that is the wisest thing that we have to do. And then we have to adopt prudence on our expenditure. If you do not do that, it means that there's nothing that we can do, because you still have to go and look for the taxes, and then it will also cripple the growth of your industries.
Okay, I want us to talk about some of the policy measures that we could consider. I don't know if the finance minister would announce any major ones for tomorrow, but a key aspect has got to do with our energy sector, and that also will definitely affect the business community. It's something you've been looking at, the tariffs and how they are going up. Some say let's review all of these power arrangements the way they are. They don't seem to be working in our favor.
They are prudent. There should be prudence in political decisions. We are at this stage where we cannot even pay for power and all that, because if you listen to the argument that goes on with some of the dues and all that, it's not for me to come and tell somebody that they should. Let's be serious in this country, and then hold our leadership accountable for some of this mess that we have to contend with. To this one now, electricity bill have gone up the last 2 quarters over 50%, and it also trickled down into a cost.
So your profit margin is even gone.
Everything is gone. And then it's also not helping even the inflation that we talk about. Normally they say inflation, we have the one in the domestic, that's the food basket and all that. Now, there's no distinction between that and the imported one, because the thin line is, because most of the things that we use to produce for farm, the pesticides, weedicides and all that, are all imported. We don't use the wholes again. Right. And so we are not getting out of this mess because of the accumulation of taxes, the costs, and all that. And that we know that we have to get taxes, but we do not do it overly to cripple the people, especially the people who have the capacity to pay, are the same people who have been identified, and these taxes are piling up on them instead of spreading.
And Prof, the energy sector issues are very key, because from what we're getting from even the World Bank, the need for an audit and the fact that we're not even paying what we're supposed to pay, that will be the next controversial aspect, because business will come at government if we're to allow that free flow of the tariffs. Then we're also grappling with the take or pay with the IPPs. How do we deal with that? Because that will come up strongly.
Yeah, certainly. And the IMF program has flagged that. If you check the 2023 budget, unlike earlier years, we now have a expenditure line item called other expenditure. If you open that up, you will see our indebtedness in the energy sector. Okay. And the plan is that we don't need to accumulate new arrears. We have to find a way of adjusting the existing arrears through the system. That is certainly unbearable. Okay. If you look at maybe investment in that sector, which ordinarily should reduce the inefficiencies, partly maybe we can look at that from maybe generation losses. Every country has some, it's very difficult to reach 100% in terms of efficiency. Right, so a certain level of inefficiency, perhaps we can tolerate that. Beyond a certain point, it's difficult to price with that level of inefficiency. So if you look at our generation losses, transmission losses, distribution losses, it's just too high.
Would you expect a statement? Would you expect a statement from the finance minister on that? Because till now, we're not clear if government intends to go that hard on the auditing before the arrears is cleared. And mind you, just at the end of this month as well, there's another bill piling up from the IPPs, averaging some 200,000 plus. So it's shooting up our figures. How do we? Are you expecting a statement from the finance minister on that?
Yes, we expect something from there, because one of the structural benchmarks under the IMF-supported program is a strategy with respect to the energy sector. Okay, that would have to go through cabinet and all of that. The end date for that one was June, and therefore we expect that there will be some pronouncement in that area in terms of how this will be dealt with. But whether we like it or not, the energy sector is a black hole in our financial space.
So pay more?
If you look at the planned utility adjustment under the program, I think we will not be fair to ourselves to think that
don't scare us, please. Don't scare us. So we have to pay more. You're telling us.
I think that unless we improve significantly in terms of the inefficiencies in that area and the rest of them, I'm expecting that there will be an upward adjustment as we go deeper into the implementation of the IMF supported program. Remember that other factors also come into play, right? Probably the generation capacity in that area is in cedis. The servicing obligation to the IPPs are in dollars or in foreign exchange, and therefore the stability of the currency itself also plays a role. Otherwise, you can keep increasing the utility prices, you collect them in cedis, but then the depreciation actually wipes out all the adjustment before it reaches the IPPs and all of that. So you are looking at the whole management of all of this, and then also you link that also to other critical sectors. But I think Dr. Obeng mentioned something. You know, the state feels that once you're able to generate more revenue, it doesn't matter the approach the tax handle, we are okay. No. You see the impact of the trade corridor from Togo. Okay. You see a lot of our ladies go to Togo to import.
Do some
clothes,
trading
everything.
from there.
Yeah.
Okay. Meanwhile, these things are not manufactured in Togo. They are manufactured outside. They import them to Togo.
Yeah.
But because of taxes are low and all of that, they are able to import it to Togo, package it in Togo, maybe a little value addition, export it to Ghana, and it's cheaper than what the average Ghanaian business person will produce here. Look, let me give you an example. You import something through Ghana, and you see the layers of taxes. Okay? Any agency, government institution, just wake up, they put some margin in there.
Right.
They put some margin in there. They put some margin in there. You import something, and you see the taxes. Look, when you go to a VAT-rated shop today, and you buy something, you will see that the spaces that tax handlers take on the receipt is longer than the item you bought itself. You will see VAT.
Right.
You will see COVID-19 health. You will see this. You will see get fund. You will see this. Why? There's no breathing space.
Okay,
You cannot
but in all of this,
out of poverty. You cannot. So I think it's not only just that. We should look at our port tax system also. Okay, given that 70% of business input cost is imported, if you have those layers of taxes at the production level, actually it's pre-production level, it's going to pass through your production process.
I see.
And it will increase your cost.
Okay,
and
I
it
want
will
us to
make you
do
uncompetitive.
Yeah, let's deal with this very finally. The next tranche of the IMF bailout, 600 million. I understand we've taken receipt of. The next will be another 600, which will at least solve part of the challenge we're looking at.
November ending also.
Are we positive, looking at how we've fared so far?
I think that the next major review will be somewhere in November, and probably they will be looking at the June date structural benchmarks, and then also September, and the rest of them. Given that government wants to send a right signal to the investor community, government will work largely in line with the timeline for this year, and therefore, most likely, if you see. And it will not be strange. It's not peculiar to the government. The 16th IMF program, there were a lot of waivers and modifications. Okay, so they passed us. Okay. Sometimes not that we passed, but they passed us.
Okay.
Okay, so that we could get the tranche. So I'm very hopeful that the next tranche would come. But probably the last quarter of 2024, because the election peaks around that time, there is risk, and it will not be peculiar to only this government.
Yeah.
We saw that also during the 2016 election, and that last quarter program review what
maybe a challenge. But we hope for the best, hoping the government will pass this test this time around. Professor Obeng, thank you for spending some time with us here on The Probe. And as we wrap up, Dr. Obeng, there's one issue I need to pick your thoughts on, even as you make your final comments about some of the developments in Niger, for instance. There's a coup d'etat that we know that will bring onions into the country. You've been monitoring the situation as well. Some of your traders go there for trading activities. You're worried as a group?
Yeah, but this is agricultural produce. If we do our things right, something like onion shouldn't be imported to country. We have large arable land to cultivate. So I don't want to even have any mercy for anybody. We should. If
you feel it's our problem?
No. If we think that is going to create a problem, the land is there. Let's fund the resources to give to our farmers to just speed up, and
but can you talk to your traders? Talk to them so that
let me tell you, most of our traders, the traders that we think that we are nuisance, you know that most times during the farming season, if they are yam sellers, if they are tomato sellers and all that, most times they offload the resources to these people they buy the goods from. Are you aware of that?
Really?
Yes. Because the person will farm and then she will be the person to buy, and then you take the money that he gave advance to the person. Right. So we are very positive. Much as we are trading, we are also supporting the local productivity of our food items. Right. And they do that. You see, most times they think that we sell even extorsively high. When the farmer produces tomato, he is crying that by evening, if it is not purchased by us, it will go waste. And so he is offloading the risk to us. And you think that we have gone to buy cheaper from. Let me talk something about the IMF.
Yes, very quickly.
The inflow, the money that we are expecting, the second tranche. It's not about the money coming in. It's about how we are going to consume the money. Yeah? We don't even, we are not looking the way of the service industry. Most of them are not being, okay.
Yeah, we'll continue the conversation, definitely. We've run out of time, but Dr. Obeng, it's been such a pleasure having you in studio. So grateful that you've been able to join us. Dr. Joseph Obeng is the president for the Ghana Union of Traders Association. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and also to Professor Obeng for doing the discussion. This has been The Probe with me, Blessed Sogah. Until then, as we await the address from the Finance Minister, just log on to myjoyonline.com. So many stories for you to catch up on. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.